Welcome. Hello, good afternoon or evening, depending on where you are. Thank you for your interest in today's collaboration between Elders Climate Action, ECA, and the Third Act. My name is Mark Cook in Tucson, and I am one of three co-chairs of ECA's Education Committee, responsible for making events like today's possible. We at ECA are excited to welcome Third Act and its co-founders, Bill McKibben and Vanessa Arcara. Third Act organizes people over the age of 60 to work on climate and racial justice. We think this will be the first of more future former collaborations between ECA and Third Act. Many of us already know about Bill, who in 2008 also co-founded 350.org. Vanessa, among her other accomplishments and roles, spent a decade with 350.org as an actions coordinator before moving to Third Act as president. The current CO2 concentration is about 420 parts per million, which is 20% beyond the 350 parts per million limit we did not want to exceed. So we have so much work to do. If you have participated in or viewed prior national calls, this will follow a familiar format. Over the next hour, Bill and Vanessa will introduce us to Third Act, and after that time, there will be an opportunity to ask them your questions. Please use the Q&A icon at the bottom of your screen to post your questions rather than the chat, and the questions will generally be addressed in the order submitted following their remarks. So without further delay, I will turn this over to Bill and Vanessa. Thank you.
Well, many thanks for that, Mark, and what a pleasure to be with you all. Maybe I'll talk for a few minutes and then turn things over to Vanessa. I'm just a volunteer in this Third Act effort, and she's the boss, but let me talk first just a little bit about where we stand right at the moment on climate, this issue that animates you and has animated me since I wrote the first book about it 33 years ago now. It's been a busy few weeks, actually, and I'll try to explain sort of where things seem to me. But you can read, if you want, the long piece that I published in the New Yorker website on Friday that's gone fairly viral, a piece called "In a World on Fire, Stop Burning Things." And I will, I'll just talk about the last few weeks a little bit, because I think they're illustrative of where we find ourselves right now. On the pure climate front, y'all probably paid attention last weekend when the temperature in parts of the eastern Antarctic rose 70 degrees Fahrenheit above the normal temperature. It's the largest temperature deviation we've ever observed on planet Earth from normal. It's the equivalent of if today it was 165 degrees in Phoenix. It's astonishing and scary number, and a reminder of just how much trouble we're in at the moment. Also, of course, we're transfixed by the horrors of the war in Ukraine, and by the fact for the first time since many of us were young, we've really seriously been having to go to bed at night thinking a little bit about the possibility of nuclear war. And the thing that links these two things, of course, is fossil fuel. Fossil fuel is what drives the climate crisis, and fossil fuel is what gives Vladimir Putin his army. 60% of his export earnings come from oil and gas. If you looked around your house for something Russian manufacturer to boycott, I bet you wouldn't find anything unless there's a bottle of Stolichnaya in the back of your liquor cabinet or something, because basically oil and gas is what they do. And it's their weapon too. Threatening to turn off the taps to Western Europe has kept the Europeans cowering for 2 decades as Putin's become ever more a bully. I got to write a piece, an essay last week with an old colleague of mine in Ukraine, a wonderful woman named Svetlana Romanko. And we did an essay together that really focused on the on all those links, on the fact that Exxon, who birthed climate denial, and Exxon, the biggest oil company on earth, and Exxon was also the biggest backer of Putin's oil and gas machine. Rex Tillerson, the former CEO of Exxon and Trump's first Secretary of State, owns the Order of Friendship of the Russian government, pinned on his lapel by Vladimir Putin at Putin's dacha in return for $500 billion investment in Russian oil and gas in the Arctic. Oil and gas that's exploitable only because we've melted the Arctic. And the same banks that are funding the fossil fuel industry, the banks that are really the focus of many of Third Act's efforts at the moment around climate change, as Vanessa will describe, these are the same banks that have spent the last 20 years building up Putin's enterprises. The banks that were getting people to cut up their credit cards from, the banks were trying to get people to boycott. They're the same banks, like Citibank, that was the depository bank for the Lukoil, the second biggest oil and gas enterprise in Russia, on and on and on. All of this, I think, is bringing us to a decision moment, a choice point around climate in a way that we haven't had one yet. And it may be the last choice point that we get in a physically relevant time period. And that was kind of the burden of that piece that I wrote in the New Yorker last week, though I'd been at work on it before any of this broke out. Basically, the good news is that we're now at a point where renewable energy is so cheap and so technologically capable that there's no longer a technical or financial reason not to be making a rapid switch. Indeed, the continually spiraling reductions in cost mean, according to this big Oxford study that I described at some length in this piece, that if we made that rapid transition, the world would save upwards of $25 trillion simply because we'd sooner get off the business of paying for oil and gas and coal. The good news about the sun, of course, is once you've paid to put up your solar panel, the sun delivers your energy for free every morning when it rises above the horizon. So that's the good news. The bad news is we're not obviously making that switch at anything like the speed that we need because of some combination of inertia and toxic vested interest. And that vested interest is on display in many ways. It's obviously been on display in the US Congress this year, where the man who took more money than anybody else from the fossil fuel industry, Joe Manchin, has managed to block the Build Back Better bill with its extensive climate provisions. The oil industry got a remarkable return on investment for buying Joe Manchin. And I'm not sure, at least for the moment, that there's a way around him in Washington. That's one of the reasons that we're so fixated, concentrating so hard on banks, on the financial system, because I think we have maybe a better chance of making rapid progress there. These banks are profoundly wrong-headed since the Paris Climate Accords were signed. Chase, Citi, Wells Fargo, Bank of America have put up more than $1 trillion for the fossil fuel industry. They did not need Donald Trump to sabotage it. They were happy to do it themselves. And they're doing it with our money. 70% of the financial assets in the country belong to baby boomers or the silent generation, compared with about 5% for millennials. So another way of saying this is our life savings are being used to ruin the life chances of our children and grandchildren, all in the search of a little bit of short-term profit. It is disgusting. And happily, the opposition to it is building fast. Uh, I was able to do a wonderful long conference call over the weekend for thousands of people with not only Svetlana Romanko, my friend from Ukraine, but also the actor Mark Ruffalo and the wonderful actress Meryl Streep, very much a part of our third act generation. And what we were talking about was banks. Hollywood happily has risen up against its local bank, City National Bank, the Bank of the Stars, for just this reason. And people are withdrawing their accounts, but they're also all pitching in to try and help with this work we're doing. Those of you who are on the third act national call last month, there were thousands of people on, and they got to see Carole King announce that she was going to cut up her credit cards come year's end if these guys hadn't made some progress. If you join us tomorrow night, you'll get to see Bette Midler doing the same thing. People are really joining in this pledge that we've got going, and I think Vanessa will explain in a minute some of the mechanics of that and some of the ways that everybody can pitch in from ECA as well as Third Act in trying to build support around this. But the point I want to make is that it has to happen quickly. We're really out of time here. And unless we can figure out how to build as big, strong, noisy, powerful a movement as we can in very short order, we're not going to get a hold of this in the necessary amount of time. The fact that the Antarctic was 70 degrees above Fahrenheit last week, above normal, and that the Arctic was simultaneously 40 degrees Fahrenheit above normal at the North Pole, those are they're not even warnings at this point from the natural world. Those are declarations from the natural world about how far out of bounds we have pushed this system and how little time we have to right it. So we have to go for the biggest possible levers. One of those levers is labeled politics. That's the one we usually go for. And I think we've got it pulled all the way to the ground, and I'm not sure there's much play left in it. We'll see what happens in Washington over the next while, and we'll definitely try to keep pushing where we can, especially around Congress. I started a campaign online about 3 weeks ago for this project that I've been calling Heat Pumps for Peace and Freedom, a kind of reprise of the Lend-Lease effort before the Second World War to get materiel off to Europe. In this case, not armaments, but technology like heat pumps to allow them to get off as much of Vladimir Putin's oil and gas as possible before it gets cold again next October or November. And the good news about that effort is it doesn't require Congress to help. Joe Manchin doesn't get a vote because Biden can, if he wants, invoke the Defense Production Act, as has happened 50 times since the war in Korea. Both Biden and Trump invoked it in order to speed up vaccine production. Well, they could do the same thing to get millions of heat pumps and millions of tons of insulation off to Europe this summer and installed. So that's one possibility out of Washington. But I think we also have to be very determined about pulling the other lever big enough to matter, and that's the lever marked money or finance. Washington's important. Wall Street may be all important. It still has a outsized global role, and it moves quickly when it moves. So I think our goal is to try and make as much progress there as fast as we can. Let me just add that I think people of our vintage are crucial at making this happen. Our argument at Third Act, and it's been catching on. I mean, we're getting many thousands of people now joining these calls and so on, is that we're quite capable of playing a really serious role here. That our first act as a generation was strong, interesting, powerful. We were around to bear witness to or participate in big social, cultural, political transformations. Maybe our second act, taken as a whole, was somewhat less interesting, perhaps a little more devoted to consumerism than to citizenship, all things considered. That water has flowed beneath the bridge, and it is time for our third act to be absolutely, absolutely focused. Fun, but powerful. We have the skills, we have the resources, we have some time, we have the grandkids. As long as we marshal it effectively, not just fritter it away and actions that don't add up to enough. As long as we build it into something strong enough to matter, we have some chance, no guarantee, but some chance of making enough difference in time to ward off the very worst of climate change. But that window, as the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change said in its report 2.5 weeks ago, I mean, it was a 6,000-page report, but the last paragraph said, the window for action is closing. That message is beginning to get through in the right places. The Secretary General of the UN today said that it's immoral and absurd to continue to keep financing fossil fuel projects. That's very strong language from the world's top diplomat, but he obviously is scared from the scientists that he talks to regularly. We should be scared too, but scared in a useful way that allows us to get to work on a small series of highly leveraged, highly effective actions that take advantage of all we've got. So that said, I'm going to turn things over to Vanessa now, and she can describe what some of those specifics look like and how you can participate. And I will just say, for now, we'll get to answer some questions maybe in a little while. I'll just get to say enormous thanks to you all for good, hard work. We're very grateful for it. Everyone's grateful for it. I've spent most of my life organizing and working with young people, and I know that they are grateful for the work that y'all are doing and showing the kind of leadership that's required. So, Vanessa, over to you, friend.
Thank you, Bill. I was really moved that Mark started out this call by invoking us being at 420 parts per million against the 350 parts per million we should be. And Bill just laid out some numbers from the IPCC. And ever since I started getting to know the divestment movement a lot of years ago, it occurred to me that numbers keep showing up as being just incredibly important in all of this. And so we're really, really grateful that we're able to partner with you all at ECA and across the movement writ large to get some numbers going on these campaigns. Numbers are really important and really matter here if we're going to make some change in these 4 big banks and across the financial industry. And so we're lucky to be on board with you. Bill has said this a number of times. These businesses in the financial industries, their business plans don't center around the fossil fuel industry. So it's going to be possible to change the way that they operate. And so we're aiming with this Banking on Our Future pledge to prod that process along in short order. One big bank changing its mind and changing its practices can really serve to be a domino for the rest of them and start the kind of race to the top that we need. So we are in the process of launching a campaign. It will likely last a while, probably at least throughout this year, to amass as many signatures and participants in this banking pledge as we possibly can to show our might to the industry. So in a minute, I'll go ahead and share my screen so that you can all take a look at how to participate if you'd like to. But the essence of it is very simple. The essence of it is saying, if you have a bank account or a credit card that is linked to one of the 4 big most polluting banks, Chase, Citibank, Wells Fargo, and Bank of America, that if you sign on to the pledge, you're pledging to close it and to move your money if they don't move away from funding the fossil fuel industry. It's really quite simple, and of course has some moving parts to it. One of the questions that we got a lot when we were developing out the pledge was, well, what happens for folks who would like to participate and show their support, but who bank with a credit union or don't bank with one of those 4 banks? We've created a second pledge, a separate one for folks who are not currently account holders, to say, well, I pledge to never work with these banks, and that can be really powerful too. So we've launched the pledge now for about a month, and a lot of thousands of folks have signed on already, and we're looking to get a heck of a lot more before the end of the year, so that in due course we can start approaching these banks. And we're going to be hosting training seminars at Third Act and lots of events, ways to help people understand how to go in there and hold conversations with bank branch managers, letting them know that this is coming, requesting formal replies. And there's going to be a year of good and it's sometimes hopefully really fun escalated actions about how we're going to be letting the banks know that we're coming. But first we got to get a lot of numbers and names on that pledge. So we're hoping that everybody here is interested and willing to join us. And I will say we've been doing this for a few weeks now and have gotten hundreds of questions from people about the implications of this and the how-tos and all that. So, and I'm seeing some of those come in here on the chat. And then without spending too much time looking at all of them right now, I'll say we've developed FAQs on our Banking on Our Future page at Third Act that respond to a lot of the big questions that are coming in right now. Things from, well, what about insurance companies? What about my pension? All of that, who is addressing all of that? To, questions that relate more to personal finance. I.e., what happens to my credit score? What about X, Y, and Z? So we're addressing a lot of those. And luckily, there's a big landscape out there of folks who are already working on this. And so we're trying to pull everyone together here. Last week on the 14th, we had a teach-in around this pledge that involved not only other partners that we're working with, like Stop the Money Pipeline and the Sierra Club, but personal finance and green banking experts who were able to answer a lot of those questions. And those links are available now on our website, and we can certainly, I'm sure through Mark and Jen and Francis, we can organize to have some follow-up links sent out for folks who have some more specific questions about the implications of all of this. So just to say, if you have questions, that's great. And we're doing our best to answer a lot of them in turn. So, without going on too much longer about the mechanics of it, I want to just make sure that everybody can lay eyes on what this looks like, as it might help move everybody toward signing. I am going to go ahead and share my screen now so that you can see the page that's set up specifically for ECA. Which we're really excited to be able to do. I'm hoping everybody is able to see my screen right now. It says Banking on Our Future Partners page. Great. So this is what this looks like. And if you scroll down, there's a lot of this good context that we've been laying out here. And in short order, you'll come to these 2 red buttons. The first one saying, yes, I'm an account holder, or I hold a credit card with one of these 4 big banks and I want to sign the pledge. The second one down here says, I don't, but I pledge never to. And you'll see that there's a lot of other data, links, materials down below the pledge, why older Americans are key. This is a very important thing we haven't really driven home quite yet, but one of the ways that this is going to work is by waiting, taking the pledge and then waiting, not going to your branch quite yet and closing your account. If I walked into especially because I'm one of those millennials in that under 5% category, if I walked into a branch right now and closed a checking account, I don't think they would take very much notice of it. But if we organize a day of action where 100,000 people show up on the same day to do that very thing, they sure as heck will. So we're asking folks not to switch their bank accounts or close their credit card accounts just yet. We're going to do that all together. It's going to be fun. And we're going to help make that switch easy, or as easy as can be. It might take a couple of hours, but we're pretty sure it's going to be worth it. So throughout the course of the year, we're going to be figuring out ways to do really fun actions around this, going in, being at bank branches themselves and all of that. But we'll be hosting a lot of events throughout the year, helping people make the switch and pointing folks towards better banking options as they're increasingly coming online. So down here in materials, I just want to point out to folks quickly before we take a look at the bank pledge itself, that we've amassed a lot of materials for folks. And one of them, if you're excited about this, is this very top one here called the Banking on Our Future Toolkit. I won't go through opening that toolkit right now because it's long, but gosh, if you have any questions about the pledge that I haven't answered or the bill hasn't answered, the answers are there. And the toolkit really exists as a way to help folks message about this and talk about it and start organizing in your own communities about this. So there are sample posts and videos, sure, and the videos are great. You really should watch them. But there's also a lot of sample language and ways to start conversations with folks about the links between banks and the fossil fuel industry and climate change. And then for those of you who are wanting extra credit, there's just a heck of a lot of other materials and links down here as well that you can look over. So the pledge itself, if you were to click on one of those two red buttons at the top, would bring you to a page that looks like this. Sign the pledge, move your money. These are mostly instructions that Bill and I have talked through here. Don't move your money or cut up your credit card quite yet, and on and on. But this is it. It's a very simple form. It says, if the 4 big banks continue to lend their money to the fossil fuel exploration and development, we're going to collectively pledge to move our accounts. And it's going to ask you for some very basic information so that we can organize these events on the ground going forward with all of you. And then this form down here basically is just asking you to tell us, hey, where do you have your account? And if you've had an account for a while with any one of these banks, it's really helpful for us to know how long you've had it for, because we know this industry cares deeply about customer loyalty. So to be able to tell folks, we've got folks who have held an account with you for 48 years and they're willing to close it, means something. So let us know that information if you can and if you'd like to. And then there's a space down here for you to share a personal comment about why you care about all this. We're going to be using those in our social media campaigns, ad campaigns, and other campaigns throughout the years to help tell a good story. And that's it. It's pretty simple. Sign the pledge. So I know that Jen has this link and Mark and Francis, and I can go ahead and share it out in the chat boxes too. And we're hoping that all of you on the call are excited to join us. And it's going on 7:30 here. I know we want to leave a lot of good time to do Q&A. But one of the other things aside from the pledge that, we had just wanted to talk about is, Third Act, like ECA, focuses a lot on how to stop the fossil fuel industry and protect our climate. We're also working hard on this democracy side of things, not only because it's the right thing to do, not only because we do need to work hard to protect our democracy now more than ever, but also because we're never going to make meaningful change on climate without a functioning democracy in the United States. And so Bill had mentioned this call, excuse me, this big national call tomorrow evening with Bette Midler and others, and we hope you'll join us for that. And if you do, in addition to this pledge, there's other work that we're going to be announcing on the call tomorrow to get folks engaged with mobilizing for the midterms and the early primary races in ways that we can help shore up victories as hard as we can in swing states. So there'll be a lot of good energy on the call for that. And we're going to be excited to be in partnership with ECA going forward around that and the pledge and all else that y'all are up to and what's to come on our end too. Bill, did I miss anything there?
I don't think you missed a trick. I think you were right down the middle and exactly right. There are a bunch of questions that obviously come immediately to everybody's mind. Many of them addressed in those FAQs, but you know they fall into a sort of broad category of things that we can answer about. What do I do? Where do I get a credit card instead? What happens to my airline miles? On and on and on. And happily, these things are getting easier to answer almost by the week because A, people are figuring out a lot of them, but B, more and more banks, credit unions, other parts of the financial structure are emerging to say we see a market here and we're eager to take some of this business. And that's a good sign. That's every once in a while, parts of capitalism work the way they're supposed to. So that's good news too. So I don't know whether we should dig in here, Mark, and start working our way through some of the questions, or you tell me what.
Sorry, I was having.
You're muted
Mark,
again.
Your audio just cut out for some reason.
Let me, Mark, we're having a hard time hearing you, so we're going to, let's go to some of these questions here, and I'm just going to start reading down and we'll get in different, some of them will be about this pledge and some about other things. First of all, someone asked, where's the link for tomorrow night's call? I bet Vanessa can put it in the chat, but if you go to thirdact.org, you'll find it easily. Does divesting from Citibank stock count for the pledge? Absolutely. Get rid of your Citibank stock, but do it wait until the end of wait until we're all doing this together at the end of the year. These banks are so huge that, they're the central pillars of our financial system. So each one of us doing our thing one by one is, the proverbial gnat biting the elephant on the butt. We need to do it all at once, so at least we're, more like a skunk biting the elephant on the butt, and maybe they'll notice. And I will tell you that excellent news on the divestment front came in just while we were having this call. Those of you in the Midwest, the city of Chicago, today decided to join Paris, New York, London, divesting all its holdings in fossil fuels. So that's terrific. I have a Chase credit card because it's an affinity card with Southwest. Is there an effort to get companies like Southwest to change the card? Yes, that'll be part of this going on. I don't think it'll happen before the year is out because I think they'll need to see that there's a real anger around this here. But it's definitely one of the things that one of the kind of further parts of this campaign that we're going to be working on. United has affiliation with Chase, so does Costco, for all you rotisserie chicken and 128 ounce of laundry detergent lovers. There's a lot of these kind of things. People are saying, well, so there are other banks that aren't on the list. Is that because they don't fund fossil fuel projects? No, there's a lot of banks that do at least a little bit, but they haven't risen to the same level. They're not as big. So we're really going after the giants here. But there are an increasing number of banks that are disengaged from fossil fuel, including a few big ones. First Republic Bank in California, which has operations across the country, turns out to be one. For people on the East Coast, Amalgamated Bank in New York City has been tremendous on all of this. For people on the West Coast, Beneficial State Bank is tremendous. Online, Aspiration Bank, some others who are, and these are places you can get credit cards, so on and so forth.
And just
Vanessa,
on that
Linda,
point,
I'm sorry.
we might have just had the same thought at the same time. On that point, there have been folks writing into us with questions about, beneficial state banks or, these various banking products and credit cards. And one of the reasons it's going to be so important to get so many names, really a ton of names on our pledge, is to also help convince some of these smaller banks, like Bill mentioned, First Republic, Amalgamated, to try and offer better banking products and services to fill the gap. And if we can show them, we've got tens of thousands of potential clients looking to come your way. I think there's reason to believe we might stand a chance at being able to help create a bigger space on the right side of things here.
Vanessa, Linda's asking, I've signed the pledge, but I don't have any confirmation that I actually did. How do I know that you know that I did? That's a good question that I have
Great question.
I have no answer to.
We have an autoresponder set up on our pledge. So everyone who signs should get an email right away saying, thanks for signing, please send this out to your friends. If you didn't get it, there's a fair chance that it went to your spam. Also, if you use Gmail, we're finding that the promotions filter in Gmail is not our friend around campaigning emails. So apologies if you're not seeing that easily. It should be coming through to you. And, I will say, if you have any questions around that, or if you're looking really hard and you don't see anything, you can always write to us at info@thirdact.org. And we have someone who's responding to every message now. So they can check on your status and we can get back to you.
There's a good question from Sally about Amazon Prime and Chase. And yes, Amazon is a huge credit card customer. And one of the questions is Third Act working on Amazon? And interestingly, the answer is going to be more and more yes. Keep your eyes peeled. Before the spring is out, there's going to be some remarkable data coming out demonstrating that for many of these big tech companies, their banking arrangements are the biggest single source of carbon emissions in their entire business. And that's going to be a good lever to start going to work on people like Chase. So keep your eyes peeled. We'll have lots of information about that at Third Act. It comes out. Here's someone who recently paid off their mortgage at Wells Fargo. Many congratulations. So which button do I click? Pick the one saying that you're never going to deal with them again unless they get their act together, that the mortgage for your next 2 or 3 houses, you'll have to get it from somebody else. Someone says, if these banks say they'll only finance green infrastructure, how will we hold them accountable? If ExxonMobil says it needs funding to build windmills or solar panels or whatever, yeah, that'll be part of the ongoing effort to prevent large-scale greenwashing. The good news is that the banking world is oddly, there's a fair amount, not perfect, but a fair amount of transparency. People know what deals who's engaged with over what. You can read this remarkable document. The next version will be out in a few weeks, but you can read last year's. It's called Banking on Climate Chaos, that a number of groups pulled together. Rainforest Action Network actually does most of the real number crunching, but it's remarkable in its level of detail about what each of the biggest banks in the world, 50, 60 banks, do in terms of all their connections. So we have a pretty good focus on who's doing what. And we're in a position, I think, to be able to monitor probably the place where negotiations might emerge at some point, or the thing that we might be able to force them to agree with sooner rather than later, is an end to financing anything that expands the size of the fossil fuel enterprise. And that's a recognized category that they track there in that Banking on Climate Chaos report. And I think that's sort of job one. Vanessa, are you reading some more of these? You're probably ahead of me.
I am. I was just looking at, will you be providing information on ethical banks and financial service organizations? You know, Third Act legally isn't able to offer direct investment advice, but we are pulling friends together who are, and who are willing to, present, and certainly sharing links to point people in different directions. So we will be we started on our teach-in last week, and we'll be doing that more and more, helping folks understand how to move their money. So that was a question from Paul.
David Woodbury asks, what about Canadian banks like the Royal Bank of Canada? That's very interesting. This is the bank that when I was on with Meryl Streep the other day, Royal Bank of Canada actually owns City National Bank, the Hollywood bank that all the movie stars bank with. And so that's really who they're going after, and going after hard. The big Canadian banks actually trail not that well, somewhat behind just because of their size, but they're on the top 10 list of the most damaging banks in the world, mostly because of their extensive relationships with the tar sands in Alberta. That's where most of the money has come out of Toronto for those projects. Someone asks, and this is switching gears a tiny bit, I'm a big proponent of heat pumps. However, how do you power them in Ukraine? The first thing is, the plan at the moment is less to try and get them into Ukraine itself. I'm afraid Ukraine's infrastructure of all kinds is going to be in a hard place for a little while. The real hope is to get them quickly into Germany, France, the UK, so on and so forth, so that they're no longer subject to the weapon of gas and oil that Putin continue. I mean, these guys continue to buy oil and gas even now from Russia because they're so tied to them. Some of them, people are replacing gas and oil furnaces. Some of the power that, for at least for the time being, that powers those heat pumps, some of the electricity will come from gas-fired power plants. But even in that case, heat pumps are so much more efficient than the furnace in your basement that they save a lot of energy, a lot of gas, even that way. Let me add that that was sort of one of the points that I was trying to make in this New Yorker piece that I hope people may take a moment to read, because it's really an effort to reframe how we think about energy. The point of the piece was, we've reached a stage in human evolution where after 200,000 years of setting things on fire, Darwin said that fire, along with language, was one of the two things that distinguished our species. We've now all of a sudden reached a point where we don't need to do it anymore, where we can put out virtually all the fires on the planet. The one under the hood of your car, the one in your power plant, the one on the stove in your kitchen, the one in the furnace in your basement. We can replace all of these with the fact that the fact that the good Lord was had foresight enough to hang a large ball of burning gas 93 million miles away in the sky, and now we have the wit to know how to make use of it. So it's an incredibly exciting turning point if we choose to seize it, to go to this, to imagine quickly a non-combusting future. And that's part of what this heat pumps for Europe thing is about. If we can put out a few million fires in a few million European basements, that'll take a big chunk of change out of Vladimir Putin's war budget. Your turn, Vanessa.
A few folks have written in asking about youth organizing. And I'll iterate Tom Rawson's question here. As organizing is a good strategy, and another group that they think of when about really impressive organizing work is Sunrise Movement.
Is it just me, or are other people having trouble hearing Vanessa's feed there?
I think it may be you, Bill. It seemed like there was a little feedback coming from you.
Okay, good. In that case, I'm just unmute again. Good.
I'm glad y'all can hear me. So can you talk a bit about making our organizing cross-generational? Yeah. So the idea of starting Third Act in a way was actually a response, I think, to thinking cross-generationally about our movements, because we all know, Sunrise and a lot of other youth-led groups have done incredibly powerful work in the past 5-10 years to foreground these fights. And so in a sense, it was leaning into this idea that we need more elders walking hand in hand with our youth movements and offering support and being good listeners, but being good activists too, and really stepping up to meet the moment. So the drive to start Third Act in some ways was a response to thinking cross-generationally. But of course, we are talking with the folks at Sunrise and a lot of other groups. Our very first day of action actually at Third Act, which was sort of a beta test of our model in general with organizing, was backing up the folks over at Future Coalition, who are a youth-led group, US-based group, climate focused. And so they did an action out in front of banks across the country, and we were happy to figure out some good signs and slogans to have people go out and be present with them. Bill was out in Boston for that action in October. And we'll be doing a lot more of that. With Future Coalition, there's a new national group getting started called Earth Uprising that our friend Alexandria Villasenor is starting. Sunrise and a lot of others. So we're looking to do more and more of that at a partnership level. But one of the things that we're doing a lot at Third Act, in addition to organizing in these campaigns, is hosting events. And we have this big national call tomorrow, and we get to be here with you tonight. But we'll be increasingly holding more and more calls and more conversations that encourage real digging in across generations, talking about elderhood, but also talking about what it's like to be young in this movement. And I'm lucky because I get to sit right in between. So thanks for asking that question.
Sherry asks, how can we push Biden to compensate low-income citizens hit by rising gas prices? Very good question. I recorded a long video today that Move On sent out to their whole list, explaining that this is actually the perfect moment for a windfall profits tax on the fossil fuel industry. It's not like Exxon's done anything to earn the huge amount of money they're getting because Vladimir Putin started a war and the price of oil went up to $100 a barrel. It's the absolute definition of windfall profits, and they should be redistributed quickly to those people. Steve in London is talking about how can we coordinate campaigns and actions from the UK and the US. Very good question. I've been back and forth some with George Monbiot over at the Guardian about how to be doing some of this. And I know that he and you everyone's involved a lot over there with Extinction Rebellion. Steve asks, what are people's attitudes towards civil disobedience? This is one of the most interesting things we've found at Third Act. When we survey people, by the thousands, they're saying, yeah, I'd like to write some letters or whatever, but I want to go get arrested too. It's amazing how many people have on their bucket list spending the night in jail for the right thing. And we're going to be able to help you with that going forward, because there's going to be some serious opportunities. It's not the only thing we need to do. Sometimes it's a very useful way to underline the moral urgency of, and it's particularly appropriate, I think, for older people to be doing it. I coordinated I wrote the letter asking people to come to Washington to get arrested at the start of the fight over the Keystone Pipeline. 10 years ago, which turned into the biggest civil disobedience action about anything in this country in a long time. 1,200 people went to jail. And it was the thing that really helped kick off that successful battle against big oil. When I wrote that letter, I said, I did not think that young people should have to be the cannon fodder here, because if you're 19, an arrest record may not be the absolute best thing in the world for you. One of the few unmixed blessings of growing older is, past a certain point, what the hell are they going to do to you? It was really great to watch people with hairlines more or less like mine arriving in Washington. We did not ask people, how old are you, as they were getting arrested. That seemed rude, but cleverly, I think, we said, who was president when you were born? And the two biggest cohorts were from the FDR and the Truman administrations. And it was remarkable to see, remarkable for the kids who were there working as young people are leading this movement most times. They got to see elders acting the way we need elders acting. So that's one part of it, Steve, and I'm really grateful for the leadership that's coming from the other side of the pond, and we'll keep trying to figure out ways to work together. Vanessa, do you see some more there?
You know, I just closed the Q&A and noticed that there are a heck of a lot more questions in the
Yes,
chat.
I see a
that I haven't
couple
been
here.
looking at either. So I was just starting to comb through these, and I don't know, Jen and Mark, if there's anything that is on your radar that you want us to particularly.
I see a couple here. What about people who have mortgages with these banks? Those are hard to switch. Absolutely understood. Mortgages often get sold down the line. Don't sweat it too much. Truthfully, I think the thing that's really emerging as the centerpiece of this campaign has to do with credit cards. Credit cards are less sticky than accounts. They're easier to, and it turns out that they really hurt the banks. The bank spends an average of $1,000 in promotion and marketing costs to land a new credit card customer. So if you cut that thing up, it's a, you're cutting a small piece of their heart out, and that's why when we get to the end of the year, we're going to call this holiday towards the end of the year, we're going to call it Scissors Day. And I know that a couple of you have, those high-end titanium cards from Chase or whatever, and you're going to need a pair of bolt cutters or something. But for most of us, the scissors from the kitchen, everything drawer are going to be sufficient to do a lot of damage in the course of a day, and it's going to be a lot of fun when it happens. It's not burning draft cards. That was a long time ago, but it's not 1,000% different either. It's going to make an impact.
We've been making a lot of jokes over this way about getting a really good laser cutter. Someone asks if Third Act is a 501c3. We are a 501c4 currently with a fiscal sponsor that is a 501c3 as well. And we'll be leaning into that 501c4 status more as we get our I's dotted and T's crossed to help us come out a little bit on the sharper edge of political discourse as the midterm season marches on.
Can I just jump in to see if I'm heard?
You are heard, Mark.
Thank you. So yeah, I don't know if there are more questions. I lost stuff when I had to get out, but I can just see if there are other questions.
Someone asks, do you think that invoking the Defense Production Act by the Biden administration is possible? It's certainly, I think it's politically possible, and it's definitely logistically possible. They've done it before. It's happened 50 times since the Korean War. As I said, Biden and Trump did it around vaccine production, but Biden also did it earlier in his administration because, and this certainly has a climate component, because during the worst of the wildfires in California, we started running out of fire hose. And so Biden invoked the Defense Production Act to get a factory in Oklahoma producing hundreds of miles of fire hose overnight, because we needed it to try and put out those blazes before they burn down any more cities in California. So it's completely possible to do it. He just needs to hear from a bunch of people saying, yeah, do this. And it's been fun watching what started as a kind of something I just put out in a little piece of writing I did. Within a couple of days, the Times and the Post were calling up and saying, we're hearing from our sources in the White House that they're really interested in this. What is it all about? And so on and so forth. And so we'll see what happens. But it's a reminder that when you're in a weird moment, weird and difficult and sort of horrible moment like we're in, the one upside to it is that the normally endless political process, the years that it takes for any new idea to gain traction, so on and so forth. Sometimes that can get short-circuited a little bit and we can move more quickly, which is precisely what we need to do. As I said, I'm not sure we're going to get another chance like this at all in the 7 or 8 years that the scientists have told us we need to dramatically trim emissions. This is a powerful decision point because there are 2, not 1 reasons now weighing on us. The fact that we have to deal with the climate crisis and the fact that we have to deal with the Putin crisis, both should lead us in the same direction and give us some chance here.
Just as some evidence of the speed that all of that is moving, Riva put in the comments that folks who are interested in this should check out the Rewiring America report that came out. That might have even just been last week. But the good folks over there who really do know a heck of a lot how to make electrification happen put out a report in response to all of this, really laying out a plan for folks to dig into and to begin to use. So wanted to call that up from the chat too, because that's a really good read, and I believe that that's also a resource that's listed on our Biden heat pump page on our website as well.
We want to be respectful of your time. We're just about out of it. And I know there are other questions, including in the chat, so I'm sorry we didn't get to everything. But yeah, this very nearly concludes tonight's event. We at ECA are particularly thankful to Bill and Vanessa because this is an especially busy time for them with their own event tomorrow. And in general, just getting Third Act built up. So Bill and Vanessa, thank you so much. We look forward to working together. We also appreciate our members and visitors. And as in the past, if you registered, you will receive an email and recording of this event. Please join us for next month's national call featuring Dr. Christy Ebi from the University of Washington and a lead author for the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change 6 Assessment Report and for the 4th U.S. National Climate Assessment. That was mentioned earlier by Bill, I believe. A most current IPCC report is expected early next month. The subject of Dr. Ebi's presentation will be climate change's health, key findings from the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change 6 Assessment Report. So with that concludes tonight's panel, and we look forward to seeing you in the future. Thank you.